the haunted playground. It was a bright, sunny day in Peppa Pig's World. The playground stood tall with its swings and bright slides. Peppa, George, and their friends were playing happily. The air was full of laughter and joy. It was a typical afternoon in their colorful world. Suddenly, the wind picked up, and a weird sound came from the swing set. At first, Peppa didn't think much of it. But when she looked towards the direction of the noise, she saw the swing slowly moving back and forth. But there was no one on the swings. "Do you see that? Why is it just moving on its own like that?" Peppa thought to herself. George Pig was standing next to Peppa. He looked up at the slide and immediately his eyes widened. There was a shadow standing behind the swing set, just out of sight. It was impossible to see what it was clearly, but it looked wrong. Like it didn't belong in a happy, colorful playground. Before Peppa could figure out what was going on, the atmosphere, which had been so cheerful, started to change. The rhythm slowed, and a low, horrific sound could be heard. "This isn't funny anymore," Peppa said, grabbing George's hand. "Let's go home. I don't want to play anymore." As they tried to leave, the playground itself seemed to stop them. The once bright colors of the swings and slides faded to dull grays and browns. The once friendly playground began to turn into something evil. The slide twisted into a different shape, now resembling a massive serpent with sharp, jagged teeth, its mouth open in a frightening scream. The swings hung like dangling limbs, swaying left to right in the wind. "Peppa! George!" Daddy Pig's voice was filled with panic as he looked around. "What's happening?" The playground had turned into a complete nightmare. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse, and the sounds of whispers could be heard from every direction. The once friendly and familiar place now felt threatening and dark. Every shadow seemed to move, and strange, barely audible screams echoed from the now transformed equipment. "We need to get out of here," Daddy Pig shouted. But when they tried to leave, all the exits were blocked by a thick black fog. The playground had become their prison. They turned in every direction, only to find that the once open spaces were now narrowing, the boundaries closing in. Peppa Pig and George Pig were terrified, their hearts racing as they realized they were trapped in the nightmare they once knew so well. Peppa hung onto George, her voice shaking. "What do we do now?" As the darkness consumed the last rays of light, the swings creaked louder. The serpent slide hissed in the distance, and from the darkness they heard a voice. Its tone was soft and mocking. "Welcome to the real game." The fog was still close to the edges of the playground, and the darkness that had spread earlier was still present. Peppa Pig, George Pig, and Daddy Pig had been wandering for what felt like hours. They had tried everything they could think of to escape this horror. Running, calling for help, even trying to jump over the swings. But nothing worked. The playground was definitely alive. Peppa Pig had many thoughts going through her head. Even worse, the sad reality was beginning to set in her mind. She wondered if they would ever escape this nightmare. The ground beneath their feet seemed to constantly shift. The shadows grew longer as they moved around the horror playground. They had no way of knowing how much time had passed since they'd been trapped in this nightmarish version of their playground. There were whispers that seemed to echo around them. The whispers seemed to mock them as they tried to make sense of what was happening. Peppa's voice was small, filled with exhaustion. "Daddy, I don't understand. Why are we still here?" "I don't know," Daddy Pig replied, his voice trembling. "But we have to find a way out." They turned to look at the twisted slide again. The serpent-like shape of it seemed to move, its eyes now glowing with a dark red light. The once bright playground was now an endless maze of sharp edges and distorted shapes. It was as if they were in a place between worlds, a place where nothing was as it seemed. They had no idea that this Peppa Pig horror world was a dark, twisted place, far different from the happy world of Peppa Pig. Suddenly, the same voice could be heard again. It was much louder this time and more horrifying. "Do you think you can leave? This playground is the last place you all will ever visit." The voice seemed to come from everywhere, and yet from nowhere. It was as if the ground was speaking to them. The trees around them were bent into unnatural shapes, their branches towering up into the sky. The swings began to move violently, as though they were trying to tear free from the chains that held them. And in all of this, there was still no one visible anywhere near the swings. Peppa, George, and Daddy Pig were now all mentally exhausted. They had lost all sense of direction, and it seemed they were roaming around in endless circles. "We have to stop this," Daddy Pig said with fear in his voice. As he took another step forward, a deep rumble shook the ground, and the playground shifted once again. The slide stretched even more. Its snake-like body moved even closer toward them. The air was ice cold, and Peppa's breath came out in visible mist. "Help!" George Pig cried, looking around for anyone to save him. "It's getting worse." Peppa Pig, her heart racing, looked at the ground. The cracks that had formed in the earth were spreading. Strange shapes crawled out from the holes. Ghostly figures with twisted limbs and deep, evil-looking eyes. The whispers kept getting louder, almost deafening. Peppa quickly grabbed George's hand tightly. Her voice grew stronger despite being weak. "We need to get out of this nightmare, but how?" Suddenly, the largest shadow of all appeared. It was a figure, tall, dark, and towering above them. It wasn't entirely human, its shape shifting and twisting as it moved. Its face was masked by a hood, so its features were hidden. "Leave this place or stay forever," the figure shouted. Its voice was deep and terrifying. Peppa, George, and Daddy Pig stared up at it. The fear on their faces was clearly visible. There was no way out. They were stuck in this twisted playground horror for eternity. Or were they? The figure took a step toward them, its form constantly changing like a flame. The once dark sky above them split open, revealing flashes of light. Peppa could feel her body shaking, but she refused to let go of George. Just as the shadow reached out to grab them, a loud crash sounded through the air. The figure screamed in agony, and just like that, it vanished into the darkness. The playground began to shake uncontrollably. "I think we're free!" Daddy Pig shouted, but Peppa wasn't so sure. The nightmare seemed to have ended, but the playground remained dark, filled with the echoes of past screams. Peppa couldn't get over the feeling that something more spooky was still waiting for them. Something hidden in the shadows, ready to return when they least expected it. And somewhere in the distance, the soft sound of a swing creaking in the wind reminded them. The nightmare was never truly over. Subscribe to the channel for more Peppa Pig horror stories. For more scary Peppa Pig videos, click the playlist.